Have you ever truly paused long enough to question why a single set of words has been repeated by billions of people across centuries, whispered in churches, spoken before sleep, murmured in moments of fear? Yet for so many, life continues in the same cycles of struggle, scarcity, confusion, and longing, as if nothing fundamental is ever shifting beneath the surface. And what if the real reason is not that prayer is ineffective, not that God is distant, not that faith is weak, but that one of the most sophisticated inner transformation systems ever shared has been reduced to repetition without comprehension? Because what Jesus offered was never meant to function as a ritual, a performance, or a religious obligation, but as a living internal process that alters consciousness first and reality second. And before we move any deeper, take a moment to like this video and tell me where you're watching from, because it's powerful to see how these ideas resonate across different places and cultures. And if this kind of content speaks to you, make sure you're subscribed and notifications are on, because what we're uncovering here isn't surface-level inspiration. It's about understanding how spiritual principles actually operate when applied correctly. And long before modern language spoke of mindset, frequency, or manifestation, ancient teachers understood something that has largely been forgotten. That words spoken with awareness are not requests, but instructions to the inner world. And when the inner world shifts, the outer world follows without force. And this is why so many people pray sincerely and still feel stuck, because sincerity alone does not override structure, and emotion alone does not replace alignment. And when Jesus was asked to teach prayer, the request was not for better words, but for access to the internal state from which his life flowed so effortlessly. The state where clarity preceded action, where provision appeared without panic, where peace existed before circumstances changed. And this teaching was not delivered on a stage or in front of crowds hungry for spectacle. It was shared quietly, intimately, because true transformation never begins in noise, it begins in stillness. And what Jesus encoded into this prayer begins with something most people skip entirely: identity. Because nothing in your external experience can sustainably change until the position you occupy internally shifts. And the opening movement of this prayer is not praise, not flattery, not religious formality. It is positioning. It is the act of stepping into a relationship, rather than standing outside hoping for permission. Because when you claim connection to the source of life, you are no longer approaching reality as someone separate, powerless, or waiting to be rescued. You are moving as someone who belongs, someone who has access, someone who operates from inheritance rather than survival. And this single internal shift changes how your nervous system responds to uncertainty, how your mind interprets obstacles, and how your choices emerge under pressure. Because identity is the lens through which reality is filtered. And when identity shifts, perception shifts. And when perception shifts, behavior shifts. And when behavior shifts, outcomes follow naturally. And once this identity is established, the prayer does something even more subtle and powerful. It aligns consciousness, not by asking heaven to someday intervene, but by declaring agreement between what exists in the unseen and what is allowed to appear in the seen. Because alignment is not hoping, it is tuning. It is the act of matching your inner state to a reality that already exists beyond your current evidence. And this is where most people misunderstand prayer entirely. They pray from the problem. They speak from fear. They focus on what is missing, and then wonder why their experience continues to reflect lack. Because consciousness always creates from where it is positioned, not from what it wishes for. And Jesus reverses this pattern completely by teaching prayer from the inside out. Align first, embody second, and allow circumstances to follow. And when alignment becomes consistent, faith stops being something you try to maintain and becomes something you live from naturally. Because you are no longer arguing with reality, you are cooperating with it. And only after identity and alignment are established does the prayer move into expression, not begging for provision, but speaking supply as present, not pleading for forgiveness, but releasing what blocks flow, not fearing darkness, but declaring authority over it. Because this final movement is not about effort, it is about embodiment, acting, speaking, and choosing from a state of inner completion rather than future hope. And this is where most people either activate the formula or neutralize it. Because if you speak words of completion while internally identifying with lack, the signal is mixed. But when your inner state and outer language match, reality responds without resistance. And forgiveness here is not moral performance. It is energetic clearing, releasing emotional weight that obstructs flow. Because resentment, guilt, and unresolved judgment are not just feelings. They are resistance patterns that slow or block manifestation entirely. And when those are released, movement resumes, clarity returns, and opportunities that once felt unreachable begin to appear naturally, not because you chase them, but because you finally match them. And the final declaration of protection is not fear-based, it is sovereignty-based, because when you operate from a grounded inner position, external opposition loses influence, and this is the part that transforms prayer from ritual into technology. The understanding that prayer was never meant to convince God, it was meant to recalibrate you, and once recalibrated, reality has no option but to reorganize around the frequency you sustain, because consciousness leads and circumstances follow, always. And this is why repetition without awareness produces nothing, but repetition with understanding produces transformation, because each time you engage this sequence consciously, you deepen the neural and energetic pathways that make alignment your default rather than your effort. And over time, you stop trying to manifest and start living from a state where manifestation is simply the natural byproduct of who you are being. And this is the real reason these words have endured for centuries, not as religious poetry, but as a hidden system waiting for awareness. And now that you understand the structure beneath them, you can stop reciting them unconsciously and start using them intentionally, allowing identity to stabilize, alignment to deepen, and reality to shift without force. And if this message resonated with you, let me know in the comments that this was meant for you, because I read them and they help guide what we explore next. And if you're ready to go even deeper into how spiritual principles actually work when applied correctly, the next video will take this understanding further, and I'll see you there. And now it's time to take this understanding even deeper, because if you've only listened up to this point, you've still just touched the surface, and real transformation begins at the moment this knowledge stops being information and starts becoming lived experience inside you. And this is exactly where most people unknowingly stop, because they hear truth but don't allow it to descend into the core of their being. And here a subtle yet decisive principle reveals itself, that this entire process is not about words at all, but about state. Because words only carry power when they rise from an inner condition that matches them. And this is why the same phrase spoken by two different people can produce completely different outcomes, because results are never created by language alone, but by the consciousness from which that language emerges. And when this prayer is understood and embodied correctly, it initiates a permanent internal relocation, where you slowly move out of the identity that reacts to life and step into the identity that quietly directs it, without strain, without force, without trying to convince anyone or anything. Because once the inner state stabilizes, the outer world begins adjusting automatically. And here lies another profound truth few people recognize, that consistency is what generates power, but only when consistency is paired with the correct structure, because repeating an aligned practice reshapes identity, while repeating a misaligned one only reinforces limitation. And this is why this process gradually anchors a new sense of self within you, where calm is no longer occasional, trust is no longer situational, and clarity is no longer dependent on circumstances, but becomes your default operating state. And when that state stabilizes, life no longer requires struggle to change, because your responses have already shifted. And when responses shift, situations reorganize themselves naturally, and over time you begin to notice something subtle but unmistakable, that you are no longer chasing outcomes, forcing doors, or managing fear. Instead, events begin syncing with you. Opportunities arise without urgency, conversations resolve without tension, and solutions appear without panic. Not because of luck or coincidence, but because consciousness always sets the tone reality follows. And when you stop using prayer as a scheduled habit and start living it as a continuous alignment practice, your decisions become cleaner, your relationships carry less friction, your thoughts hold less noise, and a quiet confidence begins to take root that does not rise or fall with external conditions. And this is where the deepest transformation happens without announcement, without spectacle, without external validation. And one day you look back and realize that life is no longer what it once was, not because you fought to change it, but because you became someone life responds to differently. And this is the silent center of the entire teaching, that the fastest way to change reality is not to resist it, but to stabilize yourself at the level from which reality takes instruction. And when this understanding settles fully inside you, prayer ceases to be something you do and becomes something you are. It shows up in how you breathe, how you speak, how you choose, how you respond. And from that moment, you are no longer someone who hopes things will happen. You become someone for whom things unfold naturally, effortlessly, inevitably. And if you've stayed with this message until now, it means something within you has already shifted. And this is the moment where listening quietly turns into becoming, and this is the journey we are continuing to explore together. And there is still another layer that deserves to be understood, because once identity has stabilized and alignment has become natural, something even more subtle begins to happen inside you, something most people never consciously notice but experience through its effects, and that is the quiet rewiring of expectation. Because expectation is not hope, and it is not desire. Expectation is the assumption your nervous system holds about how life will respond to you, and for many people, this assumption is shaped by years of disappointment, delay, and survival-based thinking. So even when they speak positive words or engage spiritual practices, their body is still braced for resistance, still anticipating struggle, still preparing for things to go wrong, and that hidden expectation silently overrides everything else. But when you live from the kind of inner alignment we've been exploring, expectation begins to soften and shift without effort, and instead of subconsciously asking, "What if this fails?" your inner posture begins to assume, "Of course this will unfold." Not arrogantly, not forcefully, but calmly, neutrally, as a baseline. And this is powerful because life responds more to expectation than to intention, and more to assumption than to effort. And when expectation changes, your timing changes, your patience changes, your reactions change, and suddenly delays no longer feel threatening, silence no longer feels like rejection, and uncertainty no longer triggers panic, because you are no longer using the outside world to determine your internal safety. And this creates a feedback loop where calm produces clarity, and clarity produces better choices, and better choices produce smoother outcomes, and people often mistake this for luck or divine favor appearing out of nowhere. But what is really happening is that your system is no longer fighting reality, so reality no longer needs to push back, and another shift follows naturally from this, which is that you stop over-identifying with outcomes. Meaning your sense of worth is no longer attached to whether something happens today or tomorrow, succeeds quickly or slowly, looks impressive or looks quiet. And this detachment does not reduce manifestation. It accelerates it, because pressure collapses flow while trust expands it. And when you stop gripping outcomes tightly, you actually signal readiness rather than desperation. And readiness is magnetic, because it communicates stability to the world around you, to people, to situations, to opportunities. And you begin to notice that interactions feel easier, negotiations feel smoother, timing feels less forced, and doors open without drama. And this is where many people get confused and think they've stopped trying, when in reality they've stopped resisting. And resistance is what drains energy, not action. Because aligned action feels light, it feels obvious, it feels timely, and you act not to fix your worth but to express it. And this is where effort transforms into movement, and striving transforms into participation. And another important change happens here, which is discernment. Because when you are no longer chasing validation or trying to escape fear, you can finally tell the difference between what is aligned and what is merely familiar. And this saves years of energy, relationships, and detours, because many people repeat cycles, not because they are unlucky, but because their internal state keeps recognizing the same patterns as normal. But when your internal baseline shifts, what once felt attractive may suddenly feel heavy, and what once felt intimidating may suddenly feel right. And this is not because the world changed, but because your reference point did. And this is one of the most practical outcomes of this inner work. Your life becomes simpler, not necessarily easier, but clearer. And clarity removes friction, because you stop negotiating with what you already know. And as this clarity deepens, your sense of timing refines. You know when to move and when to wait, when to speak and when to stay silent. Not from anxiety, but from attunement. And attunement is the natural